The crystal chandelier above our table sparkled, but all I could focus on was Chloe's face. She looked stunning in her red designer dress, her eyes glued to her phone screen. For 4 long years she had been my world. I had sacrificed everything for her, working 80 hours a week at the auto repair shop, skipping meals and saving every extra dollar. "Ethan, why are we here?" Chloe asked without looking up, tapping her manicured nails against the crisp white tablecloth. "This place is way out of your price range. Are you trying to act rich or something?" "I wanted tonight to be special, Chloe," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I reached into my coat pocket. "We've been together for 4 years. Through everything, you have stayed by my side." "Yeah, for long years," she sighed, finally setting her phone down. "And what do we have to show for it? My friends are flying to Paris for weekend trips, Ethan. Meanwhile, you take me to local diners." "That is about to change," I said, trying to smile despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "I saved up for 6 months for this." I pulled out the velvet ring box and placed it gently on the table between us. I popped the lid open, revealing a modest diamond band. It was not huge, but it was honest. It represented 6 months of sweat, dirty grease under my fingernails, and relentless hard work. "Chloe Vance, will you marry me?" I asked, looking straight into her eyes, hoping to see the warmth that used to be there. Chloe looked at the open box. For a second there was complete silence. Then a loud, sharp laugh burst from her lips. She laughed so hard that people at the neighboring tables turned to stare at us. "Is this a joke?" Chloe wiped a tear of amusement from her eye. "Are you actually serious right now, Ethan?" My heart slammed against my ribs. "Chloe, what do you mean?" "I love you." "Love?" She picked up the velvet box, examining the ring with pure disgust. "Love does not pay for a condo in the city, Ethan. Love does not buy designer bags or luxury cars. You think a tiny piece of glass on a cheap band is going to make me spend the rest of my life with you? I worked overtime every single day for that ring." I pleaded, leaning forward, my voice breaking. "I know things are tough right now, but I am building a future for us. My dad taught me that hard work always pays off." "Your dad is a broken mechanic working in a dusty shed in Texas." Chloe snapped, her voice cold as ice. "He is broke, you are broke, and you will always be broke. Genetics do not lie, Ethan. You are destined to spend your entire life covered in engine oil, earning pennies while real men rule the world." "How can you say that about my father?" I stammered, feeling a mixture of horror and intense humiliation. "He is an honest man." "Honest does not buy happiness," she sneered. Before I could react, Chloe leaned over and dropped the velvet ring box directly into my full glass of ice water. The box sank instantly to the bottom, the fabric soaking up the dark liquid. "Chloe, stop." I gasped, reaching for the glass. "Look at you," she said, disgust dripping from every word as she picked up her leather purse. "Grasping for scraps. I deserve a real man who can give me the life I actually merit. Someone who does not count quarters to buy dinner." "Who?" I demanded, standing up, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "Is there someone else?" Chloe smirked, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Since you asked, yes. Chad Sterling." The name hit me like a physical blow. Chad Sterling was the rich, arrogant heir to Sterling Logistics. He had visited my garage last month in his expensive sports car, mocking my uniform while I changed his tires. "Chad." I whispered in disbelief. "You have been seeing Chad behind my back?" "For 3 months actually," Chloe confessed without a hint of remorse or guilt. "He took me to Miami last weekend while you were working your pathetic extra shift. He bought me a real diamond ring, Ethan. One that did not come from a budget jewelry display." "For years, Chloe," I croaked, tears blurring my vision. "4 years meant nothing to you?" "4 years was a mistake," she replied coldly. "I wasted my youth waiting for you to become someone important. But you are just a mechanic's son. You will never be anything more." She turned on her high heels and walked toward the exit, her red dress swaying as she left without looking back once. I sank slowly back into my chair. The entire restaurant was staring at me in awkward, pitying silence. The waiter stood nearby, clutching his notepad, too uncomfortable to approach. I stared down at the glass of water on the table, watching the cheap velvet box drown at the bottom, taking all my hopes, dreams, and 4 years of devotion down with it. I was completely alone, utterly heartbroken, and crushed by the bitter reality of my poverty. How could I have been so blind? I whispered, leaving my last cash bill on the cold white table. "Goodbye, Chloe." The shocking phone call. I stared at the peeling yellow paint on my bedroom wall, feeling completely numb. The silence in my tiny Chicago apartment was deafening. Every corner of the room reminded me of Chloe. I had spent 4 years building a life for us, working double shifts at the garage, saving every single penny, only to be tossed away like garbage. Was I really that worthless because I didn't drive a sports car? My eyes drifted to the water glass on my bedside table. I had pulled my cheap velvet ring box out of the restaurant glass, but the cardboard inside was soaked and ruined. Just like my heart. For years, I whispered to the empty room. Did you ever actually love me, Chloe? Before I could sink deeper into the dark pit of my thoughts, my phone vibrated violently against the wooden nightstand. The loud ringtone cut through the quiet like a knife. I reached out with a trembling hand and picked it up without looking at the screen. Hello? I said, my voice raspy and choked with emotion. Is this Mr. Ethan Miller? A sharp, formal voice asked from the other end. I cleared my throat and sat up on the edge of my creaky mattress. Yes, this is Ethan. Who is calling? Ethan, my name is Marcus Vance, the man replied. His tone was heavy, laced with a solemn gravity that instantly made my stomach drop. I am calling from Houston, Texas. I am your father's primary legal representation and estate executor. I frowned, squeezing the phone tighter against my ear. My father? David Miller? Is something wrong? Did he get hurt at his shop? A long, agonizing pause stretched across the line before Marcus spoke again. Ethan, I am deeply sorry to be the bearer of such news. Your father passed away earlier this morning. It was a sudden, massive heart attack. The paramedics did everything they could, but he was gone before they reached the hospital. The world seemed to stop spinning. The room blurred as cold sweat broke out across my forehead. No, I choked out, shaking my head violently in denial. No, that's impossible. I just talked to him last week. He was fine. He told me he was working on an old tractor engine in Texas. I know this is a terrible shock, Ethan, Marcus said softly, his professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine sympathy. David was an extraordinary man. He spoke of you constantly with immense pride. But his heart simply gave out. You need to come to Texas immediately. I don't understand, I stammered, tears spilling over my eyelashes and running down my cheeks. He was all I had left, Marcus. First Chloe leaves me and now my dad is gone. Chloe? Marcus echoed briefly, sounding puzzled, but he quickly moved on. Ethan, please listen to me carefully. I have already arranged a flight for you leaving from O'Hare in 2 hours. A driver will pick you up at your apartment building in 15 minutes. Can you get your things together? Yes, I gasped, wiping my face with the back of my sleeve. Yes, I'm getting up right now. I'll be ready. Good. Hold on to your strength, son. There are many things we need to discuss regarding your father's affairs when you arrive. Thank you, Marcus, I murmured before the line went dead. I dropped the phone onto the bed and grabbed my battered duffel bag from the closet. I shoved 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and my toothbrush inside with frantic, shaking hands. My mind was spinning out of control. Chloe's brutal laughter at the restaurant kept echoing in my head, overlapping with Marcus's grave voice telling me my dad was dead. In less than 24 hours, my entire life had been completely destroyed. Dad was the only person who had believed in me when everyone else called me a loser. He was my anchor. 15 minutes later, a slick black sedan pulled up to the curb outside my apartment building. I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed in. O'Hare Airport, sir? The driver asked politely, looking at me through the rearview mirror. Yes, I said quietly, leaning my head against the cold window pane. As fast as you can. The city lights blurred past as the car sped onto the highway. I pulled out my phone, desperately hoping for a distraction from the crushing weight in my chest. Out of habit, I opened my social media feed. The very first post at the top of my timeline made my blood run ice cold. It was a fresh photo posted by Chad Sterling. In the picture, Chad was wrapping his arm tightly around Chloe's waist on the rooftop patio of an exclusive downtown club. Chloe was glowing, holding up her left hand to showcase a massive, sparkling diamond ring that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. The caption read, "She said yes to the right man. Upgrading her life. Out with the poor trash, in with the luxury. #engaged, #rich life, #new beginning." Chloe had commented underneath it just 10 minutes ago, "I finally found where I truly belong. I love you, baby." A bitter, quiet laugh escaped my throat. She didn't care at all. While I was sitting in a car grieving my dead father, she was popping expensive champagne with the rich bully who had humiliated me. "Enjoy your luxury, Chloe," I whispered bitterly, locking my phone screen and staring out into the dark night. You threw away 4 years for money. Gathering of vultures. The flight to Texas felt like an endless nightmare. I stared out the window of the airplane, watching the clouds pass beneath me while my heart felt heavy with grief. When we finally landed in Houston, I grabbed my worn duffel bag and stepped out into the humid air. I expected to take a cab to a small, quiet funeral home or a modest country cemetery. My dad had always lived simply, talking about his small mechanic shop and his old tools. "Where to, son?" the taxi driver asked as I climbed into the back seat, holding the address Marcus had texted me. "To this address in the suburbs, please," I said, handing him my phone screen. The driver glanced at the screen and raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure about this place?" "That is the Oak Ridge estate. Only the top 1% of Texas live out there." "Yes, that is where the memorial is," I replied, feeling a sudden wave of confusion. 20 minutes later, the taxi slowed down in front of a sprawling estate guarded by massive black iron gates. Dozens of luxury sports cars, stretch limousines and dark SUVs lined the driveway. Security guards in crisp black suits checked silver invitations at the entrance, while news reporters with flashing cameras stood near the gates, broadcasting live onto television screens. I paid the driver with my last few dollars and stepped out onto the gravel road. My heart pounded against my ribs. What was happening? Why was my dad's service being held at a palace like this? "Sir, state your name," a tall security officer demanded as I approached the gate, clutching my duffel bag in my hand. My off-the-rack black suit was wrinkled from the flight, making me look completely out of place among the crowd of men in tailored tuxedos and women wearing expensive diamond jewelry. "I am Ethan Miller," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. David Miller was my father. The guard looked down at his digital clipboard, tapped the screen, and immediately froze. His stern expression instantly vanished, replaced by deep respect. He unlatched the heavy iron gate and stepped back. "Please go right inside, Mr. Miller. Executor Vance is waiting inside the main hall." I walked down the long paved driveway, taking in the grand fountains and marble pillars. As I pushed open the grand wooden doors of the manor, the loud noise of chatter washed over me. Hundreds of powerful people, corporate executives, city politicians, real estate tycoons, and news journalists, were gathered inside the grand hall. They weren't weeping or mourning. They were holding champagne glasses, laughing quietly, and trading business cards like vultures waiting for a carcass. "Did you hear?" a man nearby whispered to his colleague. "The founder of Miller Enterprise passed away suddenly. The entire board of directors is here today to see who inherits the controlling shares. Whoever gets that power will control half the logistics industry in North America," another executive replied. "My company needs an investment from the estate, or we will go bankrupt by next month." I froze in my tracks trying to process their words. Miller Enterprise? Controlling shares? Before I could process the shock, a familiar voice cut through the air behind me. "Ethan? What on earth are you doing here?" I turned around slowly to face Chloe. She was wearing a sleek black designer dress, a diamond necklace around her neck, and a cruel smirk on her polished face. Standing right beside her was her father, Julian Vance, an arrogant man with graying hair who ran Vance Logistics. "Chloe?" I stammered, staring at her in complete disbelief. "What are you doing in Texas?" "I asked you first." Chloe snapped, stepping closer and lowering her voice to an angry whisper. "Look at you. You are wearing a cheap $50 suit and carrying a trashy duffel bag. Do you have any idea where you are right now?" Julian folded his arms, looking down at me with disgust. "Who is this low-class boy, Chloe? Why is he talking to us?" "Dad, this is Ethan," Chloe said, rolling her eyes with annoyance. "The pathetic mechanic I broke up with yesterday in Chicago. The one I told you about." Julian laughed mockingly, shaking his head. "Ah, the poor boy with no future. Son, this is a gathering for industry giants and high society leaders. My company is here to secure a vital business investment from the executors of the Miller Enterprise empire. A broke mechanic like you does not belong in a building like this." "My father's name was David Miller," I said softly, my voice cold and steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "I have every right to be here." Chloe let out a harsh laugh, drawing glances from nearby guests. "Oh please. Do you honestly think your dad owned this palace? There are hundreds of people named Miller in Texas, Ethan. Your dad was a dirt-poor grease monkey fixing rusty tractors in a shed." "Watch your mouth, Chloe," I warned, clenching my fists tightly at my sides. "Or what?" she sneered, leaning in close so only I could hear. "You are an embarrassment, Ethan. You are trespassing at a billionaire's memorial service. If you do not turn around and walk out those doors right now, I will call the security guards to drag you out in handcuffs. You really have no heart, do you?" I asked, staring directly into her cold eyes. I have common sense, Chloe replied coldly. Now get out before you ruin my father's chance to meet the true heirs of Miller Enterprise. Chad Sterling walked up to them holding 2 glasses of white wine. He took one look at me and let out a loud, mocking whistle. Well, if it isn't the grease monkey. Did you sneak past the gate to beg for spare change, Ethan? He claims his father owned this estate, Chloe laughed. Chad shook his head. Security will throw you out in 5 seconds, you loser. 4. The reading of the legacy. Before Chad could signal security, a chime echoed through the high-ceilinged grand hall. The crowd quieted down instantly as the heavy brass doors leading to the mahogany podium opened. Marcus Vance stepped forward, wearing a dark navy suit and carrying a leather-bound folder. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, Marcus's voice boomed over the speakers. We are about to read the last will and testament of David Miller, founder of Miller Global Logistics. Come on, Chloe, Julian said, grabbing her arm and pushing past me. Let's get to the front row so Executor Vance sees us. We need to secure this contract. Chad sneered at me over his shoulder as they walked away. Enjoy watching from the back, loser. I stood near the aisle, my chest tight. I didn't care about their contracts or their wealth. I just wanted to hear my dad's final words. Marcus adjusted his glasses and looked out across the sea of expectant faces. For 30 years, David Miller built this company from a single truck into a multi-billion-dollar global logistics enterprise. But to many of you in this room, David was an enigma. He rarely appeared in public, preferring to let his work speak for itself. Quiet murmurs swept through the hall. Julian leaned forward eagerly, while Chad whispered something into Chloe's ear. In his final testament, Marcus continued, opening the folder, David wished to clarify the true nature of his estate and explain the philosophy behind his life. Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping the room until his eyes locked onto mine. A gentle, reassuring nod passed between us. David writes, Marcus read aloud, his voice echoing with profound authority. To the business world, I leave a thriving legacy. But to my only son, Ethan Miller, I leave the truth. Ethan, you grew up believing I was a simple mechanic running a small shop in Texas. I raised you in poverty, taught you the value of a hard-earned dollar, and watched you work double shifts without ever complaining. Gasps erupted around the room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the words hit me like a physical force. What did he just say? Chloe gasped aloud, spinning around in her seat to look at me. Julian's face went pale. Ethan? That boy is his son. David's letter continues, Marcus read louder, silencing the rising chatter. I concealed my fortune from you, Ethan, because wealth can corrupt the soul. I wanted to ensure that my son would grow into a man of character, integrity, and true strength. Someone who values people for who they are, not what they own. I wanted you to find love and friendship based on honesty, not dollar signs. Tears welled up in my eyes. Everything made sense now. The endless life lessons, the emphasis on humility, the quiet dignity my father carried even while wearing grease-stained overalls. He wasn't poor. He was protecting me. Therefore, Marcus declared, turning to the official legal document, as sole executor of the estate, I announced that David Miller has bequeathed 70% of Miller Global Logistics controlling shares directly to his son Ethan Miller. Furthermore, Ethan is named sole chairman of the board, effective immediately, with total authority over all corporate contracts, partnerships, and executive decisions. A silent shock fell over the room, followed by a sudden explosion of excited whispers and frantic murmurs. Executives sat up straight, reporters began frantically typing on their phones, and every eye in the hall turned to focus on me. Standing near the main aisle in my wrinkled $50 suit, I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. The grief was still there, heavy and raw, but underneath it, something new ignited. A spark of pure, unyielding resolve. This is impossible. Chad spat, jumping out of his seat. There must be a mistake. That guy works at an auto garage. He's a nobody. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Marcus snapped coldly into the microphone. The blood tests, legal deeds, and DNA documentation have already been verified by the federal courts. Ethan Miller is the absolute owner of Miller Global Logistics. Chloe looked like she had just been struck by lightning. Her skin turned a ghostly shade of white, all color draining completely from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She stared at me in total, absolute horror, her eyes wide with the sudden, agonizing realization of what she had done. She had thrown away 4 years of devotion, mocked my family, and dumped me into a glass of ice water for a man with a sports car. unaware that the man she discarded was sitting on top of an empire. Julian turned to Chloe, his face twisted in sheer panic. Chloe. You said he was a broke mechanic's son. You said he had no money. I didn't know, Dad, Chloe stammered, her voice shaking uncontrollably as tears began to spill down her cheeks. Ethan never told me. He lived in a tiny apartment. You fool. Julian hissed under his breath, sweating profusely. Our company's entire future depended on getting an investment from David Miller's heir. And you insulted him to his face 5 minutes ago. I stepped out into the center aisle and walked slowly toward the front of the hall. The crowd of wealthy elites parted instantly, making way for me with hushed respect. As I passed Chloe's row, she reached out a trembling hand, her voice desperate and cracking with emotion. Ethan, please, wait. I stopped and looked down at her. The arrogant smirk she had worn just moments ago was completely gone, replaced by pure terror and regret. You were right about one thing, Chloe, I said, my voice smooth, quiet, and icy cold. Genetics do not lie. My father was a king. And you just threw away the crown. The collapse of the betrayers. The entire hall remained in absolute silence as I stepped down from the stage. Behind me, Marcus followed closely, holding a thick black binder containing the master contracts of Miller Global Logistics. Before I could even reach the exit corridor, a hand grabbed my forearm. I turned around to find Chloe standing there, her eyes swollen and red from crying. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, and her once proud, arrogant posture was completely broken. Ethan, please wait, she begged, her hands shaking as she held onto my sleeve. We need to talk. Just give me 5 minutes, please. Let go of my arm, Chloe, I said quietly, my voice devoid of any warmth or anger. Ethan, you don't understand, she sobbed, clutching her hands together in a desperate plea. Everything that happened at the restaurant, it wasn't my fault. I was forced into it. I raised an eyebrow, staring down at her with cold detachment. Forced? You dropped my ring into a glass of ice water and laughed in my face. My parents forced me. Chloe cried out, looking back nervously toward her father, who was pacing back and forth near the hall doors. My dad's company is on the brink of complete bankruptcy, Ethan. He told me that if I didn't date Chad Sterling to get his family's financial backing, our family would lose everything. I never loved Chad. I only ever loved you. You seem to enjoy his luxury trips to Miami quite a bit, I replied, crossing my arms. And your post online 10 minutes ago said you finally found where you belonged. I was trying to make you jealous, she whimpered, reaching out to touch my chest. I wanted you to fight for me. I thought if I pushed you hard enough you would work harder. I never stopped caring about you, Ethan. We spent 4 years together. You can't just throw that away. I looked deep into her eyes. Yesterday those tears would have broken my heart. Yesterday I would have done anything to wipe them away and comfort her. But looking at her now I felt nothing. No anger, no desire for revenge, no love. Just complete, hollow indifference. You didn't care about 4 years when you called my father a broken mechanic, I said softly. You only care now because the man you tossed aside holds the power to save your family. Ethan, please, she shrieked as I turned away. Don't do this to me. Mr. Miller, Marcus said, stepping beside me and ignoring Chloe entirely. Julian Vance and Chad Sterling are waiting in the executive holding room. They are demanding an emergency meeting regarding their existing vendor contracts with Miller Global. Let's go, Marcus, I said, walking past Chloe without looking back once. It is time to audit our partners. We entered the glass-walled conference room. Julian Vance was frantically pacing, while Chad Sterling sat at the long table, trying desperately to maintain his arrogant look despite the sweat glistening on his forehead. Ethan, I mean Mr. Miller? Julian burst out the moment I walked in, rushing forward with an outstretched hand. First, allow me to offer my deepest, most sincere condolences for your father's passing. David was a legendary visionary. I didn't shake his hand. I simply sat at the head of the conference table and pointed to the chair across from me. Sit down, Julian. Julian swallowed hard and sat down instantly. Chad slammed his hands on the table, trying to act tough. Look, Miller. Just because your old man left you some stock doesn't mean you can ruin our business deals. Sterling Logistics has had an exclusive shipping contract with Miller Global for 3 years. You can't just break it. Actually, Chad, Marcus interrupted smoothly, opening the binder in front of me. As sole chairman, Mr. Miller has absolute legal authority to review and terminate any contract that violates our corporate ethics code. Ethics code? Chad sneered, though his voice wavered. What are you talking about? I picked up the file Marcus handed me and flipped through the pages. According to these records from last month, Sterling Logistics billed Miller Global $3 million for ghost shipments that never took place. You overcharged our company and bribed our previous regional manager to sign off on it. Chad's face drained of all color. That was an administrative error. It was corporate fraud, I corrected, looking him straight in the eye. And under Clause 12 of this contract, systematic fraud allows Miller Global to terminate all partnerships immediately without notice, while freezing all pending payouts. You can't do that. Chad yelled, jumping to his feet, his composure completely shattering. If you freeze those payouts, my father's company will default on its loans by tomorrow morning. We will be ruined. Then I suggest your father starts looking for a good lawyer, I said, pulling out a pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the revocation form with a firm, steady hand. Contract terminated. Effective right now. No. Ethan, wait. Julian pleaded, dropping to his knees beside my chair. What about Vance Logistics? We need an emergency credit line from Miller Global. If we don't get it, my company goes under by Friday. I looked down at Julian, then over at Chloe, who was watching through the glass door, weeping hysterically as she realized her entire world was crumbling around her. My father taught me that hard work builds true character, Julian, I said quietly, closing the file. Your family built its fortune on arrogance, greed, and stepping on people you thought were beneath you. Miller Global will not invest a single penny into Vance Logistics. You monster! Chad screamed, lunging toward me, but two heavy security guards instantly grabbed his arms and dragged him backward toward the door. You destroyed us. You destroyed yourselves, I replied, standing up and adjusting my jacket. Security, escort them off the property. As Chad and Julian were pushed out into the lobby, Chloe tried to run toward me one last time, but the security doors slid shut between us, blocking her out forever. 6 months had passed since my life transformed overnight. The transition from fixing engines in a dusty garage to managing a multi-billion-dollar enterprise was challenging, but my father's lessons kept me grounded. Every decision I made was guided by the integrity he had instilled in me. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass window of my top-floor office at Miller Global Logistics headquarters, holding a hot cup of black coffee. Mr. Miller? A gentle voice called from the doorway. I turned to see Evelyn Vance, Marcus's daughter, walking into the office with a clipboard. Unlike Chloe, Evelyn was genuine, intelligent, and unpretentious. She had been my childhood friend before my father moved us away, and over the past few months, she had been my most reliable support system as our foundation director. Good morning, Evelyn, I smiled, setting my coffee cup down on the dark mahogany desk. Please just call me Ethan. You know I still dislike the formal titles. Evelyn chuckled softly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Habit, I suppose. Anyway, I brought the final draft for the David Miller Foundation for Working Class Youth. Everything is set for the press announcement this afternoon. Thank you, I said, reviewing the document. Dad would have loved this. We are allocating $50 million to fund trade school scholarships, mechanical apprenticeships, and emergency housing for struggling workers. It is a beautiful way to honor his legacy, Ethan, Evelyn said quietly, stepping closer to the window. He spent his entire life working silently to help others. Now his dream will live on forever. Before I could answer, my desk phone buzzed twice. I pressed the intercom button. Yes, Sarah? Mr. Miller, my receptionist said, her tone hesitating slightly. There is a woman named Chloe Vance waiting at the security desk downstairs in the main lobby. She claims it is an urgent personal matter and refuses to leave until she sees you. I looked over at Evelyn, who offered a quiet, sympathetic nod. Put her on the line, Sarah, I instructed. A second later, Chloe's trembling, tear-filled voice came through the speaker. Ethan, please. I know I shouldn't be here, but I didn't know where else to go. Chloe, I said, my voice completely calm and even. Why are you here? My life is completely ruined, Ethan, she sobbed frantically. Chad's family business went bankrupt 3 months ago, and he left the country after blaming me for everything. My father lost our family home and won't even look at me anymore. I am living in a tiny studio apartment, working 2 retail jobs just to pay rent. I am sorry to hear that your life has become difficult, Chloe, I replied simply. But why are you calling me? Because I miss you, she cried out, desperate and raw. I made the worst mistake of my life, Ethan. I see news articles about you every single day, how generous you are, how successful you are. I realized that you were the only man who ever truly loved me for who I was. Please give me one more chance. I will do anything. We can start over. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, remembering the girl in the red dress who had dropped my ring into a glass of ice water without a second thought. The pain that used to tear through my chest was completely gone, replaced by a quiet, absolute clarity. You didn't love me for who I was, Chloe, I said softly into the microphone. You loved the idea of what money could buy. When you thought I was just a broke mechanic's son, you threw my heart away like trash. You didn't realize that my true worth was inside me all along. Ethan, please, she begged, her voice cracking over the line. I was young and stupid. I have changed, I swear. People do not change because they lose their money, Chloe, I said firmly. They only regret getting caught choosing the wrong side. I wish you peace, but there is no future for us. Ethan. Goodbye, Chloe, I interrupted gently. I tapped the button to end the call, then pressed the security intercom. Security, please quietly escort the visitor out of the lobby. I released the button and took a deep breath. The air in the room felt lighter, cleaner, and full of hope. The final remnant of my past had finally been laid to rest. Are you okay? Evelyn asked softly, placing a warm, supportive hand on my shoulder. I looked at her and smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over my soul. I have never been better, Evelyn. For the first time in my life, I have complete closure. Good, she smiled warmly back at me, gesturing toward the doors. Because the board members, the press, and the scholarship candidates are waiting downstairs for the foundation launch. Are you ready, Chairman? I am ready, I answered without hesitation. As I walked out of the office alongside Evelyn, leaving the shadow of my past behind, I realized something important. My father didn't just leave me a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire. He gave me something far more valuable. He taught me how to survive heartbreak, how to stand tall against betrayal, and how to stay humble in the face of immense power. Money can buy expensive jewelry, luxury cars, and designer dresses, but it can never buy integrity, loyalty, or true love. Those are things you have to earn through character. I walked down the grand hallway with my head held high, ready to step into my new life with confidence, purpose, and peace.